Cansh from Gunroom.tv. It's an absolute pleasure meeting you here today.
Yes, pleasure to meet you too. Yes.
Now, obviously, as you know, Gunroom.tv normally talks to shooters in all different disciplines on what, where, when, why, and how, what they're doing. But the one thing that people forget about is that we all stick within a very tight set of parameters. Is that the right way of putting it?
Yes, I would say so, yes.
The reason why I say that is that you're not a shooter, but you are a shooter's best friend. Because would you like to explain to me who you are and what you actually do?
Okay, well, I'm a solicitor and I specialise in firearms licensing law. And everything I do relates to firearms. I should correct one thing though, Cansh, I am actually a shooter as well. So I speak from a practical perspective, and I think that's one of the reasons why clients like coming to me and welcome my advice and me being involved in the case, because I understand what they're talking about, the jargon is familiar to me, and I'm not fazed by discussions of different types of firearms, calibers, etc., whereas a lot of other solicitors that people would go to, they would quickly realise that the solicitor doesn't really know what they're talking about.
You are in a very specialist sector of the market though, aren't you? And I think this is one of the reasons why you've been up at the forefront, obviously developing this new book. Now, obviously, the original version came out in 2011, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And obviously, this is your book, and I'm going to.
It is.
Would you like to explain
to
me why shooters need to know about this? Because it's a really important part to this.
It is an extremely important part, and people will spend a lot of money on their guns and on their ammunition and going shooting, but if you don't pay attention to the detail of the law and the obligations upon you as a certificate holder and associated guidance that's issued by the Home Office, you can find yourself losing your certificate. And if that happens, then yes, you do have the right to challenge the police on that decision, but it's quite a costly and drawn out process. And that's why it's much better to take preventative action, to be well informed, to understand exactly what's expected of you as a shooter. And that's really where this book comes in. Yes, it can help people when things have gone wrong, but it's also there to give proactive advice to people so that they understand what their licensing authority expects of them, to try and enable them to get it right first time, rather than finding out after the event that the police aren't happy with the way they've done things.
I think people forget though that when our firearm certificate or our shotgun certificate comes through the post, we have to sign it. And in signing it, we've signed a legal document.
Absolutely, and you've signed to say you've read it, you've understood what the conditions are on the certificate, and your obligation to comply with it.
I think obviously with your new book you've just launched, when is this coming out, Laura? Is this actually out now?
It was actually published in August this year.
Yes,
this is the latest edition. The previous edition was published in 2011. The cover looked quite different. It was a white cover with a black and white photograph on it. Some people may be familiar with that. Well, this is the new edition of that book, and this has been brought bang up to date. It's got a lot more material in it. And there have been a lot of changes in firearms legislation since the previous edition was published in 2011.
So obviously with that, within your book, does that obviously cover things like explosives licenses for home loaders and stuff like that?
There is information about all of those things, yes, there is, and there's guidance for clubs, there's guidance on the various exceptions to the requirement to have a certificate, so that you can understand in what circumstances you can lend a gun to a non-certificate holder, and that be within the exceptions provided for in various acts of parliament.
I think, as you touched on already, Laura, the most important part about this is very much it's a prevention is better than cure.
Absolutely,
and so really, and as a seasoned shooter myself, I now know this is going to be on my Christmas list without a doubt, and not just because it's a book to have, but it's as if I get something wrong. You know, I was involved in a fracas recently, as I explained to you, and at the back of my mind was constantly, I cannot do anything about this, because if I was to get involved with the behaviour this gentleman was doing for me, I would then be losing my firearms. And if I lose my firearms, I then have to fight like anything to get back.
Absolutely.
And all shooters are very hardened shooters. Shooters are hardened people in the form of we know what's right and what's wrong. We aren't going to go out there deliberately to go and break the law. But the book here is obviously giving you a guidance and a path which will allow you to be even safer. Is that the right?
Yes,
legally?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people will say, well, I don't need legal help. I don't need membership of a shooting organisation that provides a free legal advice service because I'm never going to do anything silly with my guns.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people don't appreciate is that sometimes you can end up losing your certificate or risking losing your certificate for something that has absolutely nothing to do with guns and something which might be not your fault at all, might be completely outside your control. Like you said, you might get into a situation where you were not looking for trouble, you weren't being aggressive, but a fight erupts in a pub, you're there, and you accidentally get drawn into it. Perhaps you're trying to intervene and break the fight up, but things develop, and then you find yourself being one of the ones who's arrested and accused of violent behaviour. Or indeed, many of my clients who come to me, the situation they find themselves in losing their certificate is because of, sadly, the breakdown of a relationship, be it marriage, be it long-time partner, and allegations being made out of spite of domestic violence, which actually aren't true. But of course the difficulty is that the police have to act proactively, and if they've got a woman saying, my husband's been violent to me, I'm really frightened of him, I think he might go and get his gun and try and threaten me or shoot me, they've got to err on the side of caution and take that person's guns away, even though there may be no substance to that allegation. And that's why it's wise for people to be well informed. And also what I always say to people is it's really important to make sure that you've got insurance cover, not just public liability insurance in the event of an accident on the shooting range, but insurance that will provide you with legal expenses cover in the event of a legal dispute with the police about your certificate, so that you know if you are in a situation where your certificate's been revoked or the police are refusing to renew it, you will have access to specialist legal advice and the insurance will pay the solicitor's fees.
You see, I think this is what you said already earlier on, Laura, is that there are many solicitors out there who specialise in all sorts of laws. That's right. Obviously, the firearms is a very, very specialist law, and just inevitably a solicitor will go, yes, I can help you, but don't necessarily have the experience which is going to give them the knowledge. Yes, they can read a book, but there is always going to be times where cases versus cases, as you're aware, the precedents have been set, and they've got to go and find that, where otherwise people like yourself, who have actually been there, done it, are ahead of the curve, if that makes sense.
Yes, everything I do is about firearms law. Just to give you a little bit of detail on my background, I qualified as a solicitor 25 years ago now, and for, I suppose, the best part of 15 years now, I've been doing more and more firearms law, and I got to the point where over the last 10 years I literally do not do anything else. Every client I advise is in some way to do with firearms legislation, whether it's licensing issues, whether it's a certificate holder who is being accused of a criminal offence by the police in relation to their guns, or being told that that antique firearm that they thought was exempt in fact isn't exempt, and because it's not on their certificate they're in illegal possession of it. So everything I do is about firearms, and so I like to think I've probably got a lot more experience than most solicitors have in this field of law. Well, what I was going to say was that in terms of an appeal against a decision by the police to revoke your certificate or not renew it, that appeal is to the Crown Court. The Crown Court is traditionally the domain of criminal lawyers, and I was a criminal solicitor myself by background. But most criminal lawyers who represent people on other criminal offences actually don't know anything about firearms licensing law. And so a lot of people do find that unless they get a referral through a friend who's had a licensing issue or through one of the national shooting organisations, they struggle to source a solicitor in their local area who's got any expertise in firearms.
Now, you specialise also within a couple of other areas, if I remember correctly. One of them is the CPSA. You support the Clay
Yes,
Pigeon
I'm the
Shooting.
honorary solicitor to the Clay Pigeon Shooting Association, which, as most of your viewers will probably know, is the national governing body in England for the sport of clay target shooting. They have approximately 23,000 members, and when any of their members have a problem with their shotgun certificate, they get referred to me for advice. And if it's a situation where the certificate's been revoked and I consider they've got sufficiently good prospects of success, I will recommend to the CPSA insurers that their appeal is funded under the insurance policy for their members.
Right.
But I also work closely with a number of other organisations. I quite often represent firearms dealers as well if they have an issue, and I'm a trade member of the Gun Trade Association, which is the trade body for firearms dealers, and I am the honorary solicitor to the Deactivated Weapons Association, which is the trade body for dealers in deactivated weapons and other military items.
I think that's interesting you mentioned, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, obviously, about the historical firearms. Now, as you're well aware, with the historical, you have got the deactivated, and then you've got, if I remember, Section 7.5, is it? The limited, the exact word I'm looking for is guns which have gone out certain calibers, for example.
Yes, obsolete calibers.
That's where I was going. Sorry.
Yes. Yes, you can get an authority on your firearms certificate to possess a historical firearm, which either is possessed purely as a collector's item, not to be used at all, or there is another variation on that. You can get it with permission to shoot it occasionally at certain approved shooting centres around the country.
Right, okay.
This is under Section 7 of the Firearms
Yeah.
Act. But then there is also a general exemption under Section 58 of the Firearms Act, allowing people to possess antique firearms provided it's kept purely as a curiosity or ornament. There is a lot of confusion about that. I regularly find myself representing people who thought that what they had was perfectly legitimate for them to possess, and then the police get called quite often for some totally unassociated reason, discover the person's got an unlicensed firearm in their home and say, you can't have that, you don't have authority for it, and in fact, in a lot of cases, it is legitimate for them to possess under the antique firearm exemption. There's a lot of confusion amongst the police and their lawyers about that and the classification of antique firearms. So it is really important in that situation that if you find yourself being accused of such an offence, that you get specialist representation.
I think that goes without saying. Like,
yes.
No shooter here, and this is the thing, we're all firearms holders or shotgun certificate holders. We all go out there knowing that we are representing. Everybody is anti-gun, and I'll be honest, I feel that. And there's lots of different divisions with it, obviously clays, target shooting, PSGs, airsoft, and they're all different divisions, and we're trying, and what I'm trying to achieve, and I know that others around are here as well, is that we all actually stay together, we work together, and it's
yes, that's very important, yes, because the general public who don't know anything about and don't have any interest in firearms, they pick up a lot of negative stuff from the general media that is anti-gun. There tends to be an assumption that anyone who's got an interest in firearms is a little bit odd. And so yes, it is very important that the shooting community, all, whatever their particular area of interest, that they all work together and are unified in presenting a responsible, sensible view of shooting, and that people do keep abreast of the law, changes in legislation, make sure that they're aware and do things correctly.
No, I think from this, obviously, Laura, a couple of questions I want to put, a couple of questions more. First one is, obviously, if there's a couple of top tips, what would you recommend that all shooters were to do as default? What was the first thing? Obviously, your book is in depth and covers everything, but what top tips for somebody who's coming shooting would you give them?
Right, well, top tips. I would say that they need to familiarise themselves with the conditions on their certificate as a starter. You'd be surprised how many people haven't actually studied their certificate in any detail and haven't signed it.
I'm not saying anything, but I have heard horror stories of those in the past, right?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So it's make sure you sign your firearm certificate when it arrives.
And make sure you check it and that the details of your guns held on there are correct. Because I've had plenty of people come to me and say, well, my certificate was renewed 2 years ago, and it's only now they've revoked it last week that I've realised there's a gun still on there that I sold 3 years ago. And I told them when I sold it, but it's still on there, and they're now saying to me, what the hell have you done with it? So yes, it is important to check your certificate that everything on there is absolutely correct, and it's really important to notify the police if there are any changes, whether it's selling a gun, acquiring another one, whether it's a change of your permanent address. It's very important to comply with the security requirements in particular. People don't always lock up their guns when they get back from shooting. They leave them out and think, oh, it's too late now, I'm too tired, I'll clean them tomorrow morning. And then there's a burglary in the area. The police do house-to-house calls and discover that the individual's not locked their guns away, and whoops, now they've lost their certificate. So it's really important to be sensible about security. Don't ever leave your guns in your car overnight unless there is really no other solution.
This is one of the questions. Now, obviously, I shoot practical, so I travel up and down the country. I carry my guns with me. I try and find gun-friendly locations when I go there. What advice would you give somebody? Because obviously, the law is the law. There are a lot of shooters, regardless of what discipline it is, who travel with their firearms or the guns in their car. What's the law with regards to that? Because obviously sometimes you do have to travel. Some places will say, sorry, you can't bring guns in. What should shooters do in a situation like that?
It can be difficult, yes, because some hotels don't welcome people bringing in guns, so that can make it tricky. My advice would generally be, if you can, and I know this doesn't always work, but rather than leaving your guns in your car overnight, would be to try and find a local dealer nearby who you can lodge them with for the evening. And if you really can't find anywhere to lodge them for the night, then at least dismantle them, take part of it with you into the hotel room in your luggage, leave part of it in the car if you have to, but locked away, well out of sight. And if you're in the habit of travelling regularly, you need to make sure your vehicle is really secure in terms of alarm system and mobiliser. You need to make sure that you've got really some form of securing your guns in the boot, whether it be a specially designed in-car gun safe or whether it be strong cables that are secured to the chassis of the vehicle so that it's very difficult to remove them. Yes.
I think, Laura, with the fact that this new book of yours has now come out, where can we get this new book?
Right, well, it's available through Wildies, who are specialist legal publishers. They publish the book for us, and it's available at their shop in Lincoln's Inn in central London. They have a website, you can order it from them, and I believe you can also source it from Amazon.
Okie dokie. And so would you say that this is a must for all shooters for their Christmas stocking?
I would definitely advise that, yes, definitely.
I think in that case, Laura, thank you so much for your time and coming to see us at Gunroom.tv. It has been eye-opening, an experience which I know I'm going to take away and I know what I'm going to put on for Christmas list. All right,
excellent.
Thank you.